Hi, and welcome to this webinar showcasing your Inventor Design with 3ds Max. My name is Aldred Boyd. I'll be hosting the webinar. I'm an application engineer for Micrographics down in sunny Cape Town. And there's just my email address. If you have any questions regarding this webinar, any questions you'd like to ask me, you can please feel free to email me on that. Okay, just a little bit about myself. I am an industry specialist for the Autodesk manufacturing products. So those products will include things like AutoCAD, Inventor, uh, Autodesk Vault, AutoCAD Mechanical, AutoCAD Electrical, AutoCAD Plant. So basically, any of the manufacturing products that you do have, you've got the product design and manufacturing collections now. So we've got to kind of learn all of that stuff. And I've decided, look, 3ds Max is in there. Let's take a little bash of it. So, now I'm including 3ds Max in my portfolio as well. I've got about 18 years of experience in the industry, so I have come a long way. My forte is Inventor, but I do like to know what's going on with the other packages that Autodesk does have to offer. I'm both AutoCAD and Inventor certified, so I've taken my exams, I've done my dues. So yes, and then I'm also an Autodesk certified instructor. So if you ever do come to any of my training classes, please know that you are in safe hands, and I've done the recommended courses to be able to teach the courses in a manner that Autodesk seems fit. I've also been a presenter at both AUX, Autodesk University Extension in both Joburg and Cape Town, looking at things like sort of tips and tricks in Inventor and also iLogic. So if you've ever looked at iLogic, it's actually a great little add-on into Inventor, which does help automate a lot of the processes that we use in Inventor when designing and also when detailing. Getting out all those 2D drawings, the detailing can be quite tedious. And obviously with iLogic, you can go and automate a lot of that to drive down the time that you can actually get your design out to the client or the customer. Okay, so let's take a look at the agenda. So basically, there's just 5 things we need to take a look at. Setting up 3ds Max for you, okay, and also for the integration between Inventor and 3ds Max. Then, how to import that model from Inventor to 3ds Max. So, bringing that in to show you the settings for that. Lighting and scenes, very, very important, for doing renders. I mean, any package, so not just 3ds Max, but we'll take a look at that, how 3ds Max handles that. Then applying materials. Okay, so that's also a very, very important part of it. What does it look like? How does the light reflect off the material that you've created? And then just rendering stills and animations. How do we do that? So let's take a look. Okay, so setting up 3ds Max for you. Okay, so when you open up 3ds Max for the first time, you're going to get this little box over here, classic versus design. Choose design. Okay. Basically, the difference between the classic and design is the settings that you get for rendering. So what renderer do you use? What materials are available for you when you just open up the material editor or to apply materials to an object? What materials or what settings are there straight out the bat? So for us, we're going to, as inventor designers, we're going to choose the design. Then the user interface. Okay, so very, very important whenever you're going onto a new CAD package or any software package, the user interface plays a very, very important role in how you interact with it and also if you're going to like it or not. I know a lot of guys have come from the old AutoCAD where you had all the drop-down menus and you had the toolbars, and they loved those toolbars. And then when the ribbon got associated with or got introduced into AutoCAD, guys didn't like it. They wanted to stay. You like to stay with something that you're familiar with. So with 3ds Max, you'll see what I've set up over here. I've actually got my drop-down menu. So you got your file, edit, tool, groups, views, create, running all the way along the top over there, rendering. Then you've also got your toolbars as well. So there you'll see there from the left, backward, forward, you've got link, unlink, you've got your selection tools, you've got your scale, you've got your move, you've got your rotate, and then you've got some snap as well. So those are all sitting at the top over there in a toolbar. And those toolbars, you do have additional ones as well, which you can switch on and off. And you can have it either sitting at the top, on the left, or the right, depending where you want your toolbars to be. What it also has is also the new ribbon function that most Autodesk products have got as well. So you'll see there, you got modeling, freeform selection. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see their workspace. It's sitting on default at the moment, but what you can do is you can go and change it to have, predominantly more ribbons or, and less toolbars. So you can customize this as well for yourself. And then, once you've customized for yourself, you can take it from 3ds Max, 2021, which you got now, to 2022 to 2023, so that you're familiar with what you've got. Okay, when setting up, one of the first things you need to do is just the unit setup, okay? So just like Inventor has its units, millimeters, inches, you need to do the same thing for 3ds Max. So to do that, you click on the Customize drop-down menu at the top, and you go to Unit Setup, and then you'll get this Unit Setup dialog box over here. Now, this Unit Setup box is not actually the one that we are very much concerned with. This is just your display unit scale. So when you measure something, what does it measure in? Millimeters, centimeters, inches, meters, kilometers. You want to click on the system unit setup at the top over there, and then what you'll see is this 1 unit equals how many millimeters, centimeters, inches, okay? And that system unit scale needs to be the same as the file that you created in Inventor. So if you are working in inches, you're working in millimeters in Inventor, then you know that that's what the unit setup scale needs to be over here. Okay, so please make sure this is one of the first things you do when you are going to be bringing Inventor components or parts and assemblies into 3ds Max. The next thing we need to do is just set up your project. Okay. So with this, to click on File, go down to Project. You'll see there I've got a couple of different options for projects. So I've set there from create from current, but it's actually, you can create defaults. What it does is it sets up a whole lot of folders and subfolders in a folder that you choose, where it then goes and saves all the different 3ds Max components that you need for this. So for instance, all the bitmaps that you're going to use, maybe you've got a bitmap for a background, maybe you've got additional imported files that you've got, and it also sets the folders for where you're actually going to save all your 3ds Max files as well that you've created. Okay, so just like Inventor, where you need to set up a project so that when you do open up an assembly or an IDW, you will then go and it will then go and use the project to go find all the files that you are in need of. Okay, so once that's all set up, that's all we need to do in 3ds Max. Now we need to be able to import the Inventor model. Okay, so you need to have a little bit of setup in Inventor as well, because when you are rendering, you only render what the eye can see. Okay, so what's visible to the eye. So if you're going to have maybe a sheet metal casing with a whole lot of components inside it, those internal components you actually don't need in 3ds Max because it doesn't see it. All it does is it ups the what we call the poly count, the vertex count, where it takes longer than to go process and actually go and render the object. Also, it takes longer to go and import it from Inventor 3ds Max. And as you know, time is money. When doing a render, you've got to kind of have the best quality render versus the least amount of time. Okay, so you can't have a absolutely stunning render, but which takes like 24 hours to get to, where it's to the naked eye, the difference between the 12-hour render is not that much. So you've got to take a look at what the output is versus the time it takes to get there. Then, so one of the things you can do in Inventor is shrink wrap. Okay, so shrink wrap, what that also does is takes away some of the components that you've got. You can make it a multi-body part. This part you are able to use in 3ds Max as well. It comes in as a part, like a single component, but you are able to select the sub-objects to be able to put different materials on it. Or you can just go and suppress components in your assembly if you're not too worried about that, and then take it into 3ds Max. You'll be able to, and then it will bring it in and group it, and you'll be able to work with it from there. Okay, so this is the Inventor file import dialog box that you do have. So the first thing that it asks for is, do you import it as a body object or a mesh? Okay, so normally the default is body object, so you can use that. The nice thing about the body is that the curvatures also have high detail. But the import time does increase. Okay, so it does take longer to import a body of the same amount of parts and assemblies into 3ds Max versus a mesh, for instance. And sometimes you do get weird results. And if that does happen, then obviously go use the mesh. So with the mesh, you can also control it with the mesh resolution control. So obviously the fineness or the coarseness of the mesh. Then you've got the next thing is your assembly options. I would say leave this as is, so don't worry about all these settings. I think of the two options: reference duplicate parts and create layers by material. Okay, so we can work with layers in 3ds Max. You won't work with it as much as you would, say, for instance, in AutoCAD, unless you are creating something from scratch in 3ds Max. Then layers become quite important. But all we really want to do is you want to take your Inventor model into 3ds Max and get a pretty picture out. It's okay. So we kind of like shortcuts. We're getting to the fastest. We're taking the fastest path to our outcome, which is the rendered model or animation that we've got. One thing you can take a look at, you can also drive animations that you've created with either joints or constraints in Inventor. So if you have got that, you can import it as well. So it'll set up in the timeline in 3ds Max. Unfortunately, you can only import one driving animation. So just please be aware of that as well. Okay, so the next thing we take a looking at is just, do you merge or do you replace? Okay, so, if you bring in your first component in, you're going to be completely replace the currency. Okay, you just want your object coming in from Inventor. But maybe what's happened is you might have a part coming in from, Revit or another AutoCAD object or anything like that. So then what you do is as you bring it in, you'll merge it with the current scene. Or what you might do is, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is you might have a template that you've opened up already, a template with sort of a scene setting. Maybe it's when you go to this photo shoot, you got that like a food photo shoot or something like that. You got that white sort of canvas, that goes up and then around, so it looks quite nice, and the lights bounce off it quite nicely. Or you've got maybe a room or something like that you've created already. You want to merge all those components into your 3ds Max scene to be able to see everything that actually goes with the Inventor model that you're using. Okay, material options. Okay, so you can import your Inventor materials as well, and also assign material IDs. Now, I would have both of these put on. The difference between, well, what in material IDs is when it assigns it is, think of a bolt. Okay, so when you create a bolt, a threaded bolt in Inventor, you'll have obviously the material of the bolt, but then you'll also have your thread. And you actually can see the thread, where the thread is represented. So what 3ds Max does, it actually will cut those sort of two materials into two sub-object materials. So it'll treat the thread as one sub-material, and then the material of the object is another sub-material, which you can then play around with in 3ds Max as well through the material IDs, which get assigned to it in 3ds Max. Okay, and then this is also very, very important. Which way is up? X, Y, or Z? Okay, so when you are in Inventor, please take a look at your UCS in the bottom left-hand corner. Red, green, blue is X, Y, and Z. See which one is pointing up so that it actually can be brought into 3ds Max in the right orientation. Okay, selecting parts. Okay, so now this is also quite important because I find when going from one software package to another, if you can't select something, it gets very frustrating. And on the top toolbar, obviously, these four little buttons over here are your selection tools. So the one I use probably the most is the one on the left. Okay, that's just selecting objects. But as default, you can also window cross select. Okay, so you window select or you cross select. Think of AutoCAD Inventor from right to left. Anything inside that box or that box touches will get selected. Left to right, only everything inside that selection gets selected. Okay, so you've got that set as default. If none of those buttons are selected, you will not be able to select anything. So, please, sort of make sure one of those is selected. Also, and I haven't highlighted this in the box, the one just to the right of it, those crosses going up, down, left, and right, that's your select and move button. Okay, so if that button is pressed, if you select an object, you'll be able to select it and move it. What happens is a triad comes up with your X, Y, and Z arrows, as well as the planes on those three different arrows, and you'll be able to move it in each direction. The rotate one is select and rotate, and the third one is select and scale. Okay, so maybe you bring it into a scene, your object into a scene that you've created already. The scene is too big for your object. You can just go scale it up or down. Another thing that will happen as well is when you bring in an assembly, it immediately goes into what we call groups. Now, this group is kind of like a assembly or sub-assembly. So what you need to do is you need to open it up to be able to select inner parts. So what will happen is, I found this. I mean, I do it a lot. I forget about it. Bring it into 3ds Max, and I try and select it. It selects the whole thing, but I'm like, I want to go and put an object, put a material on, sort of the piston, or the top cap over there, but I can't select it. So what I need to do is I need to open it recursively. Okay, so by doing that, it opens up. I can go and click on each individual object, assign materials, or change the materials that have come from Inventor. And then what you must do afterwards, you must go and remember to close it afterwards. If you don't close it, you run the risk of maybe clicking on an object and then moving it, and you don't really want that to happen. Okay, so navigation, also quite important. If you can't rotate around or zoom in or out, it can also frustrate one. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see these 8 little sort of buttons at the bottom over here, and that will control, zooming, zoom extents, zoom extents for all your windows. So normally the default is to open up 3ds Max, and you'll see 4 windows: front view, side view, top view, and an isometric view. So you'll see that you'll be able to zoom everything into focus, or into the extents of each 4 windows. Then you got your pan and you got your orbit as well. Shortcut for those, which is quite useful: Z, zoom extents selected. So you select an object, you press zoom, and it'll zoom it into the active viewport that you've got. Then Control Alt and middle mouse button is zoom as well. And then your Alt and middle mouse button is orbit. I probably use Alt and middle mouse button quite a lot for orbit. Or you can just use your scroll mouse button to pan and zoom in and zoom out. Okay, so so orbit, Alt, middle mouse button. A scroll mouse button would be zoom in or out, and also to pan it around. What I would maybe suggest is, if you are, or which is a good idea, use a 3D mouse. Those are great, in Inventor for zooming in or out, and zooming and rotating and panning all the above at once. It works in 3ds Max as well, so you're able to do that, and then not lose time on being able to manipulate or navigate around your scene. Okay, so once we've done all of that, now we need to get into the lighting. So 3ds Max also uses image-based lighting, exactly like Inventor. So you can see this picture I've got over here. That was taken from Inventor. So that's one of the HDR, or high dynamic range format pictures that you've got already. So you guys know about this in Inventor already, and it works in 3ds Max as well. So it takes the picture and it shines the light from the picture onto the object. Okay, so how do we set this up? You can press 8, that's the shortcut key, or I think you click on the rendering drop down, you go to your environments and effects. You'll see there under your environments tab, environment map, you select that, and then this material map browser will pop up. Under general, click on bitmap, and it'll pull that into that, and you can use that as a map. Now, what might happen is it might be either too bright or too dim. So under your exposure control setting over there, click on render preview, and you'll see it's quite dark over there. And what you can do is, if it's too dark like this, you must lower the EV, so you can see your global exposure value over there. Or if it's too light, you must increase it. Okay. Under your exposure control, you can see I'm using physical camera. There are other sort of exposure control environments. Just click on that, see which one you're comfortable with. I like to use physical camera myself. Okay, that's just a quick render that I did with the HDR environment. You will notice, though, that there are some grainy spots over here. So that's what we call the noise. And there are settings in the renderer to be able to get rid of that, or maybe make it a bit brighter or something like that. So there are different settings to be able to make this much clearer and more realistic. Okay, then what I actually like to do is I've got a template that I use, which works very, very nicely for a lot of the renders that I do. And what I do is I just bring in my Inventor model into 3ds Max, and then I also then import the template, the 3ds Max template that I've got, and I merge it with that environment. So as you can see there, I can put in geometry, shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, space warps. Okay, that's more on the animation side, groups and assemblies, and then also bone objects, which is also animation, and also render settings. So if you've got a render setting that you know works well, the amount of sampling that you take, or how long it takes to render, comes out and it's fantastic. Bring those render settings in. The more template kind of stuff you can do, the better. It makes your life easier, and it also gets your work out a lot quicker. So you'll see there, whatever's highlighted in blue will get brought in. So, if you don't want to, arc 001, I think ground stripe 1 and ground stripe 2, that's all sort of my scene. Okay, so I've actually put a ground on there so that when I bring my object in, it actually casts a shadow onto that ground. If you don't have that ground there, which it's very good at, always please put a ground, like some kind of plane or ground in, because it doesn't really look like you've got anything. If your objects are sitting in like sort of space, it doesn't look nice. You kind of want to have something to reference where this thing is actually sitting. And then I've got my backlight and my main light, and then I've also got a camera that I brought in as well. So have cameras in as well. So once that's done, and you can see there, so that's me without the HDR lighting, but this is just with me bringing some lights in. You can see the nice shadows in the bottom over there, and you can see a ring, that darkish ring at the back over there. So this is me now merging my two scenes together and just clicking render. I haven't changed any materials, anything like that. Just me clicking on render. Okay. Creating local lights. Okay, so with that there's a panel on the right hand side. I don't have but you're able to create your lights over there. And with lights, you'll create your lights, then you'll increase your intensity or decrease the intensity. You also have an exposure value as well, so you can see at the bottom over there. And then you can also control the color of the light, or you can have a preset. So you can see fluorescent, sort of TV lights, flashlight, things like that. Or you can control it by the temperature, Kelvin. Obviously, your warm lights and your cool lights. Yeah, I don't know if you probably noticed this. Sorry, but if you buy lights for your house, you'll see in the shops you got cool, so it's warm white and cool white. I mean, I never know which one to use. So I've always got to take my bulb from the house, go to the shops, and make sure that I actually buy the right one. Otherwise, I come back and then it's like, oh, this is not the right color, that I actually wanted. Then you've got a light lister. So this is quite a nice little tool to be able to look at what lights you've got in there, what lights are on or what lights are off. Okay, so you can see there I can control things like, does it cast shadows, the color, the exposure, the intensity. So one of the things you'll also find, if you do start putting lights in from the beginning, when you start off on 3ds Max in your scenes, that it might, when you click on render, you don't see anything, even though you've got lights in it. So this is because the lights aren't bright enough. Okay, so you need to increase the intensity. So, and just play around with that. There is a setting in the viewport as well where you can say, I'd like to see all the objects in this viewport with the local lights. So if it's totally black, totally dark, you can't see any of the actual components, that means the lights aren't bright enough. Increase the intensity and you'll see how you'll now start being able to see what is actually in the scene. What I would suggest maybe is take a template you find on the internet, or maybe if you've bought one of the exercise books, you obviously get exercise examples. Take one of these examples, delete all and if you see that the lighting is good for the size of scene that you've got, delete all the objects that you've got in there, save it as your template, and then when you do bring in each component or each assembly that you got from Inventor, merge that template in. You've got your lights, and then you can just apply materials, render, Bob's your uncle. Okay, so the next thing we take a look at is materials. Okay, so now Inventor uses Autodesk materials. Okay, and these Autodesk materials are shared between AutoCAD, Inventor, 3ds Max, and Revit as well. So in any of those packages, if you're using Autodesk materials and you import it or open up in one of those four different packages, it will look the same because it's using the same material library. Okay. Now, when you bring it into 3ds Max, the default render is Arnold. You do have the art render as well. The art render is compatible with Autodesk material libraries, but the Arnold render is not. Okay, so you're going to need to do something about that. You can, if you just want to use the art render, you can do that as well. The art renderer is a lot quicker in 3ds Max than the art renderer in Inventor and AutoCAD. So that is something that you need to take note of. Okay, so what is good for Art in Arnold is the physical materials. So we've got these Autodesk materials and they're great. They're set up. I mean, you know that you've got gold or silver or aluminium, 6061, all of that. And it's all set up to look like it's supposed to be. But then you also have physical materials. And the physical materials you can play a lot. There are lots of sort of options for that to make it look as real as possible. What I would suggest is, go onto the internet, go take a look at, how people have put up the configurations for different materials as well. So by going through, and learning from that, and then you can actually start saving those materials that you are going to be using over and over again, and then just pulling it in and placing it on the objects that you bring in from Inventor. Okay, so how do we convert these materials? So, I brought my object in from Inventor to 3ds Max. So click on M, that's the shortcut key to open up the material editor. And then at the top left-hand corner, you'll see there's like a little eyedropper. Select that, select the object that you want to grab the material from. Okay. So what it does, it grabs the material. You can see there it says Autodesk at the top. Okay. You right click on the top of that name and you go change material or map type. Your material map browser comes up and then you just click on physical material. Okay, that is it. Now the material is ready and able for the Arnold renderer and to perform even better in the art renderer. Okay. Now, what I would suggest doing is before you do change it from the Autodesk to the physical material, just take a look at what the color is. So if you double click on the top there, the 82-105-43 Autodesk, you'll see on the right hand side the properties of that material come up. And then just click on the green and just take a note of the RGB values. Okay, 0.322, 0.412, and 0.169. What that then does is now you've actually got the correct color that's coming from Inventor. Then you go and change it, as in the previous slide, you go change it through to your physical material. And then there's got some nice presets there. So it will kind of get your glossiness, your roughness, your reflection, your all of those type of properties from the presets. So for instance, if I want it's metallic, I want to maybe do polished aluminum or matte aluminum. Okay, so polished aluminum, great. And then just from there, you'll see in your base color, you'll see a little bar with the color. You click on that and then just go type in your RGB value, so at least it's the same color, but it's got the properties of the physical material that you've selected over there. Okay, so just the two things that we need to look at. One is base color and reflection. Okay, so these are things that you can play with if you want to make it even more realistic or, fill with a bit more. The color of the part, your metalness, 0 is non-metallic, 1 is metallic. Roughness, so, how brushed do you want the material, how blurry do you want the material to be? And then you've also got your index of refraction. So those are things I would say, learn, while bringing in, it's one of the important things to learn about, when applying materials to your Inventor objects. And then, you've got, if you need to know about the IOR, index of refraction, you can go to this website here, pixelandpoly.com /IOR.html, and it's got the IOR values for a whole bunch of different materials. So, and if you got any rendering package, you'll probably have an IOR values there somewhere which you can then put in. Second thing you can take a look is transparency. Okay, so transparency, full transparency equals 1, no transparency equals 0. And then the base color does not control the color of if you start making it transparent, the transparency color does. And then you can select thin walled for no refractions. Okay, so you have those options over there. And those are the only two things I would say use when sort of starting in your journey into 3ds Max. Don't worry about anything else. Okay, so in the next slide, you'll see the other stuff you've got: subsurface scattering, emission, anisotropy, coating. Okay, that kind of stuff. Start to learn a little bit further down your journey. Rather just get into it and just get used to the fact this is the only options. I know 3ds Max has got so many different options, and I think that's one of the things that really scares people off. But if you can just say, look, right, these are the 10 steps that I need to go from Inventor through to getting an awesome, sort of rendering out of it. Do that. Subsurface scattering, emission, anisotropy, coating. Those are things like, if you look at the paint on a car, when you spray paint a car, they get those awesome paints. You look at it from one angle, it looks, purple. Look at it from another one angle, it looks blue. That's the kind of stuff that you can get from all of these additional material options. Coating, for instance, is, look at wood. If you just get wood, you look at it without any coating on it or any gloss, it looks meh. You put a nice gloss on it, looks a hell of a lot better. And so that's the kind of effect you'll get with these material options. But as I said, we just want to get something from Inventor from A to B to 3ds Max. Look at this a little bit later. Just look at the first two: transparency and your base material options, base color. Then let's when we render through a camera. Yeah. What this does is allows you to do things like changing your lens type, gives you like depth of field or bokeh effect, and look at shutter speed, just like a real camera. So if you've done a physical, uh, a camera course, if you've gone for photography course, it will help a lot because all the options that you see with cameras is what you have learnt in a photography course. So if you really do want to up your game, um, it's go to a photography course or go find a photography book, read about the options. This is what the physical camera is going to do about. Now, I've just said physical camera over here, but you do get other cameras which are specific to the render that you're using. So, for instance, in the Arnold renderer, you've actually got an Arnold camera. And if you've got other renderers like maybe V-Ray, which the interior designers use quite a lot, you've also got a V-Ray camera over there. And those cameras only work with that renderer. So you cannot chop and change with that. But with a physical camera, it does work with various renderers. You just got to make sure to see what works. And just on that note, I just need to mention as well that materials as well also work with specific renders. You kind of got it from the fact that the Arnold render doesn't work with Autodesk materials. So you need to know that. The nice thing what 3ds Max does do is that if you've got a renderer set, it will then go and it will only show you the materials that you can use. So you won't, if you have got your renderer set from the beginning, you won't go and choose a material that you're not supposed to. Okay, so with this as well, you've got your just take a look at the renderer. So the art renderer, okay, the Autodesk Ray Trace renderer, okay, so same as Inventor and AutoCAD, as I said, but it is quicker. And it's also got very simple controls. You can see over there, it's only got 3 tabs, common, art render, and render elements. And this is only CPU, and how it does is it works on time. So, sort of draft, medium, high, or you can have a time over there as well. So you can say, render for 30 minutes, render for 40 minutes. And if you've tried to render in Inventor, you'll know how this works. It starts all blurry and then it starts to get better and better and better over time. Okay, so that's just something that I've taken. This was a draft render I've taken, so you can see there's a lot of noise in this. There's little speckles, there's little dots. So I'd have to render this a little bit longer to get that, to get it to look much better, as my final product. Okay, then you've got the Arnold render. And if you take a look at the Arnold render setup over here, there's a lot more controls for the setup. You've got common, Arnold render, system, AOVs, denoiser, archive, diagnostics. Okay, and also with the sampling and ray depth, you can see it doesn't work on time, it works on sampling. And, things like preview, camera, diffuse, specular, transmission, subsurface scattering, volume indirect. So with this though, if you wanted to, you could just increase that camera sampling, and you'll see there on the right hand side, there's 2 columns to the right, minimum, maximum. It would increase your diffuse, specular, and transmission sampling over there. If you once you start to get used to and know what causes the noise, is it diffuse, specular, transmission, or surface scattering, then you can then just increase what needs to be increased over there. Okay, so the more you increase those numbers, the longer it's going to take to get to the end result. Okay, so you've got to kind of try and find a balance over there. Then this works on both the CPU and the GPU. Now, just for an example, I did a render the other day on the CPU, and it took, I think, 6.5 minutes. And then I did a render on the GPU, and it took 1 minute and 16 seconds. So you can see GPU rendering is a lot quicker. Just on that, the computer is running 32 gigs of RAM. It was a GeForce 1078 gig card with a i7 4.2 gigahertz processor. So just to give you kind of a rough idea of what kind of speed you're getting out of CPU versus GPU as well. Okay, so that's that over there. With the settings that I had, you can still see there is quite a lot of noise. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go and tweak it a bit, up the camera, up the samplings of of those settings over there to get a better or cleaner render. Okay, and then this is actually quite a fun render we got over here. There's a Quicksilver one. So what this allows you to do, you can do realistic. So you can see on the right-hand side over there under my rendering level, you can see I've got realistic, shaded, facets, consistent colors, hidden lines, wireframe, or clay. But then I've also got ink, color ink, acrylic, tech, graphite, color pencil, and pastel. So these are non-photorealistic renderings. Okay, so they can do this. You can do it in the Arnold renderer, but it's more a setting in the materials and how you create the materials. But this one is actually it's in the renderer, and the Quicksilver renderer is CPU and GPU. I think mainly on the GPU, and just taking a look at some of the renders that you can get out of it. So something like that. And this is not me, having to go and set up new types of sort of materials. This is just the renderer doing its thing. And I mean, this is quick. These 4 renderers, I mean, each render took me about, honestly, not more than 10, 15 seconds to get out. Whereas the other renderers on Arnold and Art, those realistic renderers were taking me about sort of 4 or 5 minutes. So yeah, so you can just see the time for that. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is just how do you do a still or an animation rendering? Okay, so each one of these renderers will have a common tab, and that common tab, if you see there, you can see I've got basically single active time segments range or frames as well. So what it will do is either it'll just take a single shot, or you can say active time segment will be if I've got an animation and it's running through 100 frames, it'll animate all of that, or range 0 to 100 or 0 to 50 or 51 to 100. Now, when you're doing animation, do not output as an animation. Okay, it does have the option there, but you just don't do it. You rather output as each individual frame. The reason for it is, things do go wrong. It might crash halfway through the animation. If you're doing it as an AVI, it's going to lose that whole AVI. But if you output it as frames, if it stops at frame 49, then you just go say, right, let's go render again, but from range 50 to 100, and then it'll do the rest for you. And then you just need to take something like a post-processing. You can go post-processing software like Adobe, and then go and create stitch it all together into an animation. Okay. Also, you'll find that that animation will be a lot smaller than it would be than if you had to render it out as an AVI or MPEG or MOV file, straight from 3ds Max. Okay, so in conclusion, just what we've learned. Okay, it's not too difficult to get into. There's not a lot of things that you need to do to be able to, apply materials, put your lighting in, move your components around, scale them, in 3ds Max. Setup is not too labor intensive, and the only labor intensive setup for this would be your materials. Okay, so just changing the materials into from a Autodesk material into a physical material. So what I do have to know, there is a automatic converter. So you can say, right, convert all the Autodesk materials into physical materials, but then you just need to go and just double check all those materials as well to make sure that they are, they are correct. Okay, so you still have to go and double check the materials afterwards. Okay, you get some great quality renders, both realistic and non-realistic as well. Then my final question to you is you have it, so why not use it? Great, so thanks very much. Do we have any questions? If you got any questions, you can either put in the chat, or I think the microphone is muted as. Okay, if there are no more questions or no, then I thank you very much for joining. Okay, I will be putting this up onto YouTube, so it will be available for there as well. And if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thanks very much for watching.